good. So it's been great to have you in class. How's everything been coming along for you?
It's been coming together slowly but surely. I've been working for a while, and I feel like there's still just kind of this disconnect between what I know versus what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, theory to application. Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah.
sure. Okay, so how long have you been at this for?
Solidly since like the beginning of June,
Okay, and when are you taking the LSAT?
November 7th.
Okay, and how many timed exams have you done or individual timed sections?
I've done a ton of individual time sections, timed exams, not as many as I probably should, admittedly. And so I do have a regiment coming up this month, but I've probably done around like 10 to 15 or so.
Okay, and how many do you plan to do per week between now and the November LSAT?
That's a good question. I've heard you recommend like a cap of like 1 to 2. And so I'm thinking I'm going to try out 2 just so I can do the Socratic review method and like really get that mental stamina ready. So I'm thinking 2, but if for some reason that isn't working for me, I'll cut it down to 1.
Cool. Yeah, I think for the flex, 2 is pretty reasonable if your other applications are not too much because flex exams are shorter.
Totally, totally.
But to me, it's about just getting you in more moments where you've got to apply it. So more time sections, more exams to put it into practice and practice putting it into practice. Theory can happen more when you're just, of course, watching course lesson videos, attending class, or even just doing drill sets because it's not the real timed experience. And so I want to give you more real timed experience to give you the chance to implement.
Absolutely, yeah. That makes tons of sense. Do you have any suggestions, I guess, for when I'm doing them? I don't necessarily get nervous about the time crunch, but I think that because I've spent so much time understanding theory, I focus so heavily on that I almost lose sight of like the agenda, like the fact that I need to get the correct answer. It doesn't matter what sort of like thoughts I have around the issue. Like, there's just like, it's all in my head and then I'm not translating it into the exam.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it comes down to more volume of implementation. And so if you have a step-by-step process, doing it enough that it becomes automatic. So for example, like Tiger Woods would swing a golf club 1,000 times to practice the swing, getting it perfect. And then over time, you're not even thinking about it anymore. But you can read books about sports theory, like you can read about tennis or about golf, but then actually implementing it, you just have to do it a bunch of times so that you're not even thinking consciously anymore.
Okay, absolutely. And to do that with this 1 month basically that I have left, just fully timed exams, just do the whole thing, knock it out of the park, and like keep repeating that motion rather than drills or individual sections at this point in my practice.
At this point, generally, yes. But if you
Okay.
notice a particular weak area on a certain question type or a certain section, you can drill that on the side, but I want the full exams to be the focus.
Okay, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I guess that brings me to a more specific question I have. So I guess this is like, how do I register for a specific time and like when will that open? And then what is your recommendation for like practicing at that specific time, like getting in a ritual, especially if I have like classes or work or things like that, but I know I'm going to take the exam at like 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Like, how should I mimic that?
Yeah, sure. So if your test ends up being scheduled 9 a.m. on a Saturday, then of course, do as many practice tests as possible at 9 a.m. Now, if you have classes typically at 9 a.m., then maybe you don't want to book your flex at 9 a.m. Maybe you want to book your flex at a time where you can do practice tests around the same time. And then also considering, are you a morning person, afternoon person? Do you want to take a siesta after lunch, or are you still pretty energized? Do you normally not wake up that early? All of those things are just things to consider. And then as for scheduling the flex, LSAC will open up scheduling approximately 2 to 3 weeks prior. They do it really down towards the test date itself. I wish they did it earlier, but it's based in part on ProctorU limitations, and they've got the October flex they just finished. They're finishing up now. And so maybe they don't want too many things they're juggling at once. And of course, folks do sometimes have tech issues. And so maybe they want to not take on too much at once on their end.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I wouldn't have thought to book it at a time that I can practice at. That's really smart. Um, and then I guess like what should I do between now and November 7th to really optimize my score, because I'm not seeing, like, based on, I think, how hard I've been working, I'm not seeing the increase that I would have hoped for myself yet. And I still have a month. And I think that it is just because I'm not doing enough application. But what should I do to like really create like optimal environment for that? What should I, like, mindset, all of these things? Like, I guess, what should I do?
Yeah, sure. Well, you already touched on the Socratic review method earlier. So implementing that, writing out your thought process, articulating it for everything that gives you trouble, everything that gives you difficulty. So have you kept a mistake journal of some kind where you're logging those and writing out your own thoughts?
Kind of. I've been vocalizing it to one of my really good friends who has been gracious enough to just listen to me speak. But I've also been writing like in the margins of my practice books and stuff, like putting stars by the things that I know I do poorly so I can come back to those. Like I'm very aware of what question types I generally miss, but maybe a mistake journal by now would help so I can get those more like refined things.
And so that you can go into more depth. I mean, if you can fit all your review in the margins, either you're writing really, really small or you're not writing enough. So I want you to start writing out more. Like if you were tasked with writing explanations for somebody else thoroughly and also walking them through your thought process as you had gone through it, like moment by moment, play by play, it would take some time. You wouldn't be able to do it for all the questions, but maybe pick the toughest ones you encountered and do that in depth.
Okay. And do you recommend, so I've seen the like different examples that you've shown during some of your classes and other videos within the course. Do you recommend using that method, like that layout?
Yeah, and you'll see that the layouts are not always identical, but generally it's about stimulus, question stem, the wrong answer that you considered or chose, then the right answer and what made it seem unappealing. And if you want to do it for multiple choices, you can, just to think about why might someone have chosen this particular answer choice and how were you able to avoid falling into that trap?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great idea, because I know that I've every time I miss almost anything on like LR or even reading comp, I've narrowed it down to 2, and then I choose the trap answer, or I choose the one that is just too extreme, or the tone doesn't match, or yeah. So that's really, yeah, that's a good idea.
And I want you to think about the mindset of simply deconstructing it, taking it apart piece by piece. And so deconstruct the stimulus, the question stem, if something threw you off like unfamiliar wording, or maybe you forgot the proper perspective from which to view the question, like strengthen versus most strongly supported, or necessary assumption versus sufficient assumption, or forgetting that it was an accept question halfway through. That can happen, right?
Oh, I do that like obscenely often. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot there. It's not even just the answer choices, although they're obviously really important, but the stimulus and the question stem can often be where the initial misunderstanding came from. And then that creates a ripple effect all the way through solving that question.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So get into the mindset where you're deconstructing this entire exam, getting into that test maker's mindset of how are they laying traps, and then how can you avoid falling into those traps?
Yeah, I really do like the way you frame that. I have found that the deconstruction has been helpful to me. So I'll up the ante on that with the mistake journal throughout this next month, and that'll help. I'm positive. So thank you.
Of course.
And then I guess my like sort of last realm of questions is about logic games. I'm either really pretty strong at them or not at all. And I can't seem to get this in between. And when I'm not strong, it's because I don't allot myself enough time for what really matters, or I get strung up on inference making because I struggle a little bit sometimes with like in and out games specifically, or like relative sequencing. So do you have any tips on how to get stronger at inferencing, and then also like keeping a pace? Like I know some should take under 5 minutes and I know some take others, but I have a hard time like figuring out how to manage that given the 35 minutes. The second I know that it's not like sequencing or even like a cookie cutter type, I try to like rush through the rules and the diagramming to give myself more time to focus on the questions. And I think that that's a mistake on my end, because then I overlook things that are like critical to the game, that when I go back to review, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I I miss that, but like I'll miss a rule occasionally because I'm just so focused on like getting to the meat of it, which in my mind is the questions.
Right. But of course, the thing is that the game is built on the assumption that you're able to make some inferences about the initial rules, combining them in some ways. Not all the time, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, there are some inferences you can make. And so as a drill, as an exercise, you could simply do a bunch of games, only the setups, not even the questions, just the setups, go as far as you can, making inferences. And then, of course, you can check it against my explanation videos to see if you went as far. And you don't have to go as far, but at least seeing how one could methodically and systematically, not just drawing random diagrams, but also seeing that there is a lot you can do. So it's worth taking that moment to pause. And then same for the rules, by the way, if you're missing a rule or skipping one or misreading one, as a drill, focusing on simply memorizing the rules. So write down the rules, symbolize them, flip over the page. Can you write them from memory?
That's an excellent idea. Okay, yeah, I think that'll help a lot. That'll help a lot because that's undoubtedly where I am going wrong. It's not that I'm misinterpreting the questions or not able to solve the questions. It's just I'm rushing to get to them. So that'll help a lot. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. And then I guess reading comprehension, I think that I'm pretty solid at, but I am nervous about me being nervous for it, if that makes sense. Like I'm worried that I'll my heart will be pounding on test day and I'll just like revert back to skimming because that's what I started out my process with doing. And now I don't do that, but that is my default with anything. Do you have any sort of resets or like preps for when I am entering that section on how to calm down and not do that?
Yeah. So first is, again, step by step, very specific, going in with a plan of attack. What is the author's opinion? You're reading first and foremost for that. So can you read the passage and simply summarize and articulate the main idea, the author's opinion? What is the primary purpose? Of course, with an eye towards answering those particular questions, but there's a lot of pressure to understand everything thoroughly, and it's such difficult, dense text. You can hold yourself to a very high standard trying to make sure, can I understand all of it and summarize all of it? People will do paragraph by paragraph, or they'll do line by line paraphrases, and that can be a good exercise, but on test day, it may take too long. So simply ask yourself, can you get the main idea? It's the most important thing to walk away with. Everything else you can go back when you need to. So my big takeaway there is don't ask too much of yourself and put the pressure on that high. And then, of course, I have master classes inside the course. I'm doing deep dives as well. We spent an hour going over one passage the other day, not even just the questions, the passage alone. We'll do another one tomorrow night too. So make sure you come to that.
I absolutely will be there. Yeah, I was at the one last week and it was like awesome to see your process and how much really does go into it. And I feel like you really did simplify it enough because it seems so like expansive and overwhelming, but you broke it up chunk by chunk. So I found that very helpful. Awesome. Yeah, then I think those are all the questions I came prepared with, at least. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Of course, these were fantastic questions, and I can see that you're really doing the work and you're going to give it your all over the next month. So I'm excited for you. Before we sign off, Catherine, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
I would say that the biggest insight I got is to, I think just like know what channels of the LSAT you personally need to work on, and then get into the LSAC's mind with approaching it, because I know exactly where I struggle and I know exactly how I struggle. But when you framed it with, do a mistake journal to see like those refineries that you're screwing up on, or like focus first and foremost on the author's opinion, like just like those things that are kind of outside of me and outside of the answer choices necessarily, like that helps narrow it down and hone in on like the actual purpose of the exam instead of just every bit of theory that's running through my head.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I'm glad that it was helpful for you. Keep in touch and I'll see you in class soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll see you probably tonight. So thank you so much. You were so helpful.
My pleasure. Of course. I'll see you then. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.